Speaking of oral law, here we go. Truman writes in and says, everything, okay, yeah, we'll read this. He says, I've been reading Brad Young's book, Jesus, the Jewish Theologian, where Young provides a multitude of examples of Talmudic teachings that are starkly similar to Yeshua's teachings. I've come to consider, in accordance with Young, that Yeshua never outright spoke against Pharisaic teaching, even oral law. Much of what he says in his parables is extremely similar to teachings in the Talmud. With this idea in mind about Jesus and oral law, I'm in a bit of conflict regarding some of my Torah-observant perspective on Scripture. Torah-observant Christians often shift the weight of what Scripture seems to dismiss about Torah or written law and claim it's actually dismissing the falsity of oral law and the yoke and weight it has on us. Take, for example, Acts 15. So my general question is, how do I make sense of this? But if you'd like more specific questions to guide your answers, it'd be, did Jesus dismiss oral law? Does Scripture say, like Acts 15, that oral law was a burden and isn't necessary? And 3, if in fact the oral law's weight has been dismissed, why did Jesus use such intensely close teaching to that of the oral law, Pharisees, and never outright condemn it? Okay, I'm going to go very shortly first, and then I will pass this over to Rob. I personally have been doing a significant amount of work within the rabbinic text, within the Mishnah and the Talmud. I've been looking at places where, I've just been reading, but I've been also documenting places where I think it is a similarity in some way to something that Yeshua has started to teach, right? Or that he has taught before. Now, my point in this is not to say, look, Yeshua's teaching Talmud. That would be extremely anachronistic, right? The Talmud is written sometime in between, I'll even be generous, 500 to 700 CE. So at the very earliest, we're talking 500 years after Yeshua is on earth, okay? I am more and more convinced that the Talmud is a response in many instances to the Gospels and the teaching of Yeshua. And we see this because they mention Yeshua. That's number one. But number two, I think that when we see things that are so often linked, I think that it's actually not that Yeshua is quoting anything from the rabbis. I think the rabbis are seeing Christianity rise, and they're saying, look, the stupid Christians, Jesus said this, but our rabbis said ... So Yeshua's off on this. He didn't even get it right. He's against the rabbis. It's not the other way around. And the evidence for this is like the people who argue the other way, it's an argument from silence. Right? They say, oh, the Talmud was around before Yeshua. Prove it. Show me that. You might have inklings of the Mishnah that are being spoken of in the first century, but even that seems to be somewhat of a response in certain places to Yeshua. Rob?
Yeah, that's a good overview of it. You're right to point out chronology. And this, what we have to bring, what are sound methods of historical scholarship, right? And one thing is chronology. One of my favorite sayings that I came up with is Jesus of Nazareth and John the Baptist are the first Jews called rabbis in history, and their religion was not rabbinic Judaism.
Right.
That you have such a transformation that happens over time, and the first century is a big time of that, where the term rabbi went from a devotional, kind of more intimate discipleship teacher of endearment, like a term of like special. This is a special teacher, that's helping me walk with God. It's not someone who, was in a chain of oral transmission all the way back to Mount Sinai that was a transmitter of the Mishnah. Now that's a later rabbinic painting that the rabbis put up. So you got to look at chronology. You got to look at polemic, like you're pointing out. And here's the other thing, that often you'll see oral law, like capital O, capital L, or oral Torah, capital O, capital T. And that too is taking a later rabbinic term, Torah She'Ba'al Peh, a Torah which is on the mouth, and it's translated. So I think Neusner probably was one of the first ones to call it oral Torah as a way of translating that into English. And projecting that, instead of looking at that as an artifact of the Talmudic world, they think, oh, the rabbi story is true. There's an oral Torah that goes all the way back to Moses. And that's a crucial thing we need to remember when we talk about the core of the rabbinic tree, the core root system of the Talmudic religion.
Continue listening to this conversation by clicking the full show link on the left side of your screen, or check out the video on the right that YouTube thinks you'll like. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you never miss content from Messiah Matters.